Gentlemen, I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on this evening and share this message from the elders. Kaya kaya broadias, marman and yoks, nuna de mort, nitchakulan nalamaya, Kalamunda budja, yayi, nandurapan, wajulas kulan, jina, nuna da nitcha, nunga burja, nunga broadias kura, yayi, birda, kedalak, birda, kaya, yunga. This meeting has been convened in accordance with clause 6.13 of the City's Standing Orders to hear submissions with respect to the Crystal Brook Concept Plan and for no other purpose. All submissions are restricted to a maximum of 10 minutes, and due to the number registered, I will be very firm on this timing. I also advise the proceedings of this meeting are being live streamed, so I would caution all speakers to be careful with what they say, as there could be issues from those who are watching. Please be respectful. The recording of the proceedings will be available on the City's website following this meeting. So we'll move straight into deputations, and the first one is from Bev Dornan. Bev, please come and give your deputation. And Bev, you know you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Bev Dornan, 28 Easterbrook Place, Wattle Grove. Good evening, councillors and city staff. As some of you may be aware, Roy Disney was co-founder of the Walt Disney Corporation. He once said, "It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are." I share this sentiment, and I trust that any decisions that councillors elect to make on the 24th of November will also reflect the published values of the city. In making this deputation, I would firstly like to thank councillors for dedicating this meeting to the members of the community who are concerned about land use in Foothills Wattle Grove. This issue has dogged the council and the community for well over 2 long years. No doubt we would all like to say enough is enough already. But as you know, the officers have put forward a report that is strongly opposed by many in the community. Firstly, because the report itself is very confusing. Secondly, because it seeks to downplay the magnitude of the community rejection of the Roberts Day Concept Plan. And thirdly, because it appears designed to minimise scrutiny of the role played by the city in this matter. This report and its recommendations will require action from councillors who are duty-bound to represent the views of the electorate on a proper assessment of the merits of any issue which comes before council. I acknowledge that I have never been in your exact position, councillors, but in a former role I was required to judge the merit of cases coming before the WA Industrial Relations Commission. I had to judge on the facts presented by the parties, setting aside all personal opinion and loyalties, including loyalty to my contracted employer. On more than one occasion, my decisions were critical of the administrative actions of my employer, and they were required to make restitution. So I do understand that deciding contested matters is not an easy task, and I recognise too that you will be facing a difficult decision next week. However, it all boils down to the fact that you will have to choose. Will you choose to support a report which raises more questions than it answers, or will you respect and represent the majority community view as you are elected to do? And councillors, please be clear about this. We have always had a clear majority when it comes to rejecting environmentally destructive land uses in this foothills locality, as shown when the electors rejected industrialisation of this area, 173 electors to 17. On the 24th of November, you will be exercising, and must be seen to be exercising, your discretionary power in a considered and appropriate manner. In doing so, you cannot be seen to be under the influence, dictation or compulsion of a third party, including city officers. No personal interests, no loyalties, no friendships, no face-saving can come into play. Under the law, you must turn your own mind to the facts and arrive at your own decision based on supporting evidence. It follows, therefore, that no councillor should ever ask the question, what do the officers think I should do in the given circumstances, as this is your judgment to make alone. The recommendations contained within the report seek to co-opt councillors into condoning the city's consistently poor decision-making in relation to this issue, including the wholly inadequate contract management of the Roberts Day consultancy, which resulted in a concept plan which only 2 members of the community supported. All reasonable persons would hold the view that this whole foray into the possible rezoning of Foothills Wattle Grove has been a monumental and costly failure, both in financial and reputational terms. Consultation was a farce, and the resulting Roberts Day concept plan was simply nonsensical. Its proposed modification by city officers is equally absurd. As far as most residents are concerned, this officer report is the last straw. It's now time for councillors, as the board of management for the city, to take control of this matter to ensure that the rights of residents in the study area are properly protected. We have a right to feel that the City of Kalamunda values this area for the residential alternatives it offers. We also have a right to expect the city to applaud, not pillory or condemn, the efforts of the community to enhance and advocate for the retention of the natural environment in accordance with the published priorities of this city. It is patently unfair for the city to direct its resources against the express wishes of the majority in the community by seemingly trying to smooth the way for potential developers who generally have no affinity for the environment or, for that matter, for the city. These developers simply want to carve up the area for the personal profit of a few and then to move on. The current rural and special rural zoning of Foothills Wattle Grove has permitted block sizes ranging from 2,000 square metres and upwards, and there is unlikely to be any impediments for those with larger properties to subdivide should they choose to do so. However, no one can deny that low-density, semi-rural living is the most sustainable form of living in an environmentally sensitive area like Wattle Grove. We ask that at the council meeting next week that you draw a line under this extraordinarily divisive period in city history, which has seen the resources of the city openly directed against the interests of the community. I hope that you see your duty clear and vote to cease all attempts to alter the rural and semi-rural zoning of the area. Furthermore, knowing this now to be the confirmed view of the community, I trust that you will also take all necessary steps to ensure that the city makes representations to the Department of Planning review, which will occur in a few months' time, to solidify this strongly held community position within the planning regulatory framework. As Roy Disney observed, it's not hard to make decisions if you hold to the accepted value of treating people fairly. And that is exactly what Wattle Grove residents want from you as their elected representatives, to be treated fairly, no more and no less. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Dornan. I would like to now ask Mr. Charles Dornan to come forward. Please proceed, Mr. Dornan.
Charles Dornan, 28 Easterbrook Place, Wattle Grove. Good evening, councillors and city staff. I attended the agenda briefing last week and was somewhat disappointed that the verbal presentation of the report on the night was characterised by the same lack of clarity as the report itself. For example, while it was mentioned that the Airport Authority had commented that soundproofing of houses may be required in the future, no mention was made of the fact that the authority had also supported retaining the rural zoning of the area. The verbal presentation mentioned one fact but not the other. How can officers cherry-pick the facts so obviously and yet still expect councillors to follow their lead? Officers are obliged to ensure councillors are presented with all the relevant facts, and the fact that the Airport Authority supports the current rural zoning of the area seems like a very relevant fact to me. My level of mistrust for the city messaging on this issue was further compounded on the night when the officer complained incorrectly that the draft North East sub-regional framework identified Wattle Grove South as urban. In fact, the city's own council meeting records for the 27th of July 2015 show at point 11 that the draft framework excluded 6 key locations, one of which was Wattle Grove South from the urban classification, indicating that these areas should remain rural. Small wonder that I and many others have lost confidence in the city with respect to planning matters. That said, however, I have not lost all hope, and that is because the remedy is in the hands of councillors here tonight. I have every confidence that individual councillors will choose to fulfil their elected responsibilities in good faith and not on the basis of the misinformation contained within this report. I'm a former educator who was involved with the preparation of reliable factual reports on a regular basis, so I can totally appreciate the quandary of councillors that councillors are facing now. Having witnessed this confusion myself at the briefing, with councillors being unable to understand why officers were recommending option 2 as distinct from option 3. The short answer is that option 2 serves the city purpose which was determined several years ago by mostly different city personnel, but completely without consultation with Wattle Grove residents. I'm referring, of course, to the city's push to rezone the study area as urban, a prospect which has now been resoundingly rejected by 3/4 of the residents in the area. But despite this majority community rejection of urban rezoning, and despite knowing that is the role of councillors to faithfully represent the community view, the officer report recommends instead that councillors endorse the officer's in-house concept plan, which is still based on the urban rezoning of the area. Furthermore, councillors are being asked to take this action against the known wishes of the majority of the community, completely bypassing the community in the process. If option 2 is adopted, the community will be denied the opportunity to accept or reject or otherwise comment on the officer's in-house concept plan for the area. This is totally contrary to the city's community engagement strategy, which states that the city will undertake community engagement on planning matters if there is any possibility at all of a risk arising which could impact on other persons in the city. Councillors ought to be aware as well that the officer's concept plan uses mythical land use typologies, e.g. urban landscape and rural landscape. These terms simply do not exist as local planning land use zones, as confirmed by the Department of Planning. Therefore, not only does the in-house plan have no statutory basis, It does not even make any attempt to reflect statutory reality. Furthermore, because it has no statutory basis, the Department of Planning has advised that no developer has to show due regard for it. Contrary to the officer's claim at the briefing that adopting this in-house plan was the only way to ensure that information related to the whole concept planning process was retained. It is important for councillors to also note that the risk assessment published in the report at point 110 acknowledges that this nonsensical officer's concept plan would not withstand public scrutiny, and yet officers are still asking councillors to endorse it. I found this stance to be quite puzzling until I realised that if officers adopted the in-house concept plan, it would constrain councillors from choosing to properly reflect community opinion that the current zoning of the area should be retained in any city submission to the framework review, which will take place in 2021, a couple of months. It would be terrific if any city submission to this review were to complement our own Ecovision submission, that this area ought to remain rural on the basis of sound evidence, and it would serve to remedy the wrong done to residents all those years ago when the city lobbied to change this area to urban without consultation. It will also be a very positive step indeed in terms of healing the division of the past. In short, councillors, option 2 is linked with supporting the in-house concept plan and seeks to induce councillors into disenfranchising the community in direct contravention of endorsed city policy and strategies, as well as the Local Government Act itself. There was also some confusion at the briefing generated by the officer that information relating to this matter would somehow disappear from the official record of this matter if the council were to adopt option 3 instead of option 2. I'm assured by the Office of Freedom of Information Commissioner that all information, including the discredited Robert Day's concept plan, must be retained as part of the official historical record, publicly available to developers and anybody else who wishes to consult them. However, why anybody would want to consult the Robert Day concept plan is beyond me. It completely failed to meet the scoping brief. There was no evidence that the 3 promised sustainability experts from Curtin were included on the project team. Only 2 community members supported it, 2 out of 214. And 3/4 of the population rejected its urban premise. Which brings us back to option 3. Option 3 is the only option presented to councils that reflects the enormity of community dissatisfaction with this whole affair. It is the only option that shows due respect for the sacrifices the community made to participate in poorly managed consultation process, even during the pandemic. It is the only option that does not seek to condone the apparent failure of the city to act in this matter with the required objectivity in the interest of the public they serve.
1 minute to go, Mr. Dornan.
Thank you. And it is also the only option that will restore our right as private citizens to the quiet enjoyment of our properties. All of these ideas are fully explained in the Ecovision position paper that you all have received and which has been described by Mayor Thomas as an excellent report. Councillors, I urge you to carefully consider the Ecovision alternative recommendations, including the all-important option 3 contained in the position paper. These recommendations are entirely consistent with your legal responsibility as councillors. They reflect the majority will of the community, and they will start the healing process after what has been a completely unnecessary debacle. I commend option 3 to councillors. Thank you for your time.
That's excellent that you did that. It was exactly 10 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Dornan. I would now like to invite Paul Cunningham on behalf of the landowner of Lot 250 or number 2 Gable Road, Wattle Grove, Mr. Ian Johnston.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. As you addressed me, Paul Cunningham from Row Group, Senior Urban Planner, and we're acting on behalf of the landowner of Lot 250, number 2 Gable Road, Wattle Grove, being Mr. Ian Johnson. By way of background, Row Group was engaged to prepare and lodge a submission on the concept plan that addressed issues primarily related to a lack of engagement with our client in the formulation of the concept plan, the designation of our client's property for public purposes, namely indicative road reservations, public open space and pedestrian access, the concept plan constraining the development potential of our client's property, and the concept plan failing to provide a delivery or implementation mechanism. Should Council resolve as per the officer's recommendation before you, which is to make modifications to the concept plan and cease further planning for the project as outlined in option 2 of the agenda report, we request a further modification regarding an additional notation with respect to the high retention value vegetation designation. Please note, however, that my client is not accepting of the high retention value vegetation designation on his property whatsoever, and is supportive of option 3, which is to cease detailed planning and reject the concept plan entirely. Our office recently met with the Director of Development Services and Mr. Mitchell Brooks, Senior Strategic Planner, to bring to the City's attention our concern that the concept plan does not specifically contain a detailed description of the high retention value vegetation designation. The current designation is worded such that it assumes the properties that were not physically surveyed by the City's environmental consultant, including Mr. Johnson's property, contain areas of medium and high retention value vegetation. The existing notation does not provide a balanced position, as it's also possible that properties or portions of properties that are designated as high retention value vegetation on the concept plan are not representative of such environmental values on the ground. Therefore, should Council resolve as per the officer's recommendation, we request that Council modify its notation on the proposed modified concept plan in recognition that it is possible that properties that were not surveyed may not have environmental values corresponding to the high retention value vegetation designation. In this regard, I understand the City's planning staff is supportive of the following alternative text being notated on the concept plan. Data from Wattle Grove South Ecological Surveys, AECOM 2020, which surveyed 94 of approximately 262 properties where access permission was granted by the landowner. It is possible that properties that were not surveyed also have environmental values. It is also possible that properties or portions of properties that were not surveyed do not have environmental values commensurate to medium and high value vegetation. Some assumptions were made when identifying areas of medium and high retention value vegetation on properties which were not physically surveyed. In summary, I ask that if Council resolve to support the officer's recommendation, that it include our additional text regarding the high retention value vegetation designation, which we understand is agreed by Council's planning staff and provides a more balanced and accurate representation to the reader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cunningham. I would like to invite Rita White to come and give her deputation, please.
CEO, Mayor and City of Kalamunda representatives. My name is Rita White. I live at 102 Victoria Road, Wattle Grove. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to express our family's thoughts and feelings with regards to our home in the area known at this point as Wattle Grove South. As we have stated in previous correspondence and surveys over the years, we are opposed to any suggestions of changing the zoning of this environmentally friendly area. We're totally committed to maintaining the current zoning. The Wattle Grove area is a valuable greenbelt on the outskirts of Perth, which is home to much precious native flora and fauna. Our property alone sees an amazing variety of bird life coming for food and water. Bandicoots, frogs, etc., all signs of a healthy ecosystem. We firmly believe it is important to retain the current zoning of the said area. Any change would see the clearing of land and destruction of many large trees, which is the natural habitat of these native birds and animals. In an edition of the Sunday Times, August 26, 2018, of which I took particular note, there was an article, Our Darling Scarp. A range of natural attractions, bush biodiversity on our doorstep. Wattle Grove is at the base of the Darling Scarp. It is the doorway to the Darling Scarp, and many of the iconic species of animals and plants mentioned in that article are found right here in Wattle Grove. In a more recent edition of the West Australian, Wednesday, September 16, 2020, our Planning Minister, Rita espouses her belief that green is best, with the headline, State Seeks Greener Development Guidelines. Medium, best if done rarely. In this article, Ms Safiotti stated the cumulative effect of medium density often became a concern and an economic impost at a later point, given the style of development often resulted in a sea of roofs, as well as the loss of tree canopy and housing diversity. That's quoting her words in that article. We read articles of the importance of outdoor play for children, both for their physical and, importantly, their mental health. Another headline, kids being outside is like therapy. Outdoor play is even now prescribed by medical practitioners and psychological experts. We have children and hence grandchildren living in urbanised residential areas, namely Wattle Grove and Southern River, where there is house upon house, that sea of roofs, with hardly any backyard. It is all very well to have a beautiful community park in the area or across the road, as my daughter does have at Southern River, but little people cannot safely go there by themselves. Mum or dad or responsible adult needs to accompany them to ensure their safety and well-being in more ways than one these days. The local residents of Wattle Grove, South, are from many and varied walks of life. The majority are here because they value the unique lifestyle, the space with no frills attached, which in our case and many others is also enjoyed by young children and grandchildren already mentioned. The veritable nature playground in the backyard, where they can play peacefully, explore, take risks while being monitored from the kitchen or family room window. Our homes may not be palaces, but they are our homes, our proverbial castles on our little kingdoms, earned through blood, sweat and tears. I implore you, our elected members, to listen attentively to those you represent and consider carefully the ramifications for all, both human and environmental, and even from a tourism point of view, when making decisions about the future of this beautiful, peaceful area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. White. I would like to invite Mr. Robert Vletter to come and give his deputation, please. Just in the middle, Mr. Vletter.
Good evening, councillors, council staff, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight I've seen many of my 146 neighbours who live in Wattle Grove South who oppose urbanisation and wanted our environmentally important and beautiful area to remain rural. The Planning Office report presented last week revealed that there are apparently 2 people out of some 640 residents who live in Wattle Grove South who support the concept plan. Even the 200 plus who put submissions in, only 1% supported the plan. That fact should not surprise anyone, particularly the councillors who have been on and off council for the past 10 years. Anyone who's been involved with the issue of urbanisation of Wattle Grove since 2004 knows how fervent the majority of residents are against urbanisation. At every one of 9 opportunities since 2004 to make their opinion known in respect to urbanisation, between 75 and 90% of Wattle Grove South residents have expressed that they are against it and want to maintain their rural lifestyle. This figure is again confirmed with public submissions received in respect to the concept plan, where in excess of 72% of respondents want the area to remain rural. The Shire's Planning Department has been targeting the urbanisation of Wattle Grove South under every Shire regime since 2004. The Planning Department has been ever reliable and consistent in preventing information selectively in a way to promote the case for urbanisation in any form, be it lifestyle villas, industrial development, the recent original concept plan or the modified concept plan. Their stance has always been on the side with the minority who want urban uses and blatantly ignore the wishes of the vast, overwhelming majority who don't. As a demonstration of the above, point 7 of the Planning Office report states, the city's local planning strategy in 2010 identifies part of Crystal Brook as an urban investigation area. Background is important. This is how Wattle Grove South became identified as an urban investigation area. In 2010, public comment was sought in respect to a proposed local planning strategy. A total of 610 responses were received, 220 of which were in respect to Wattle Grove South. Of the 220, 188 opposed urbanisation, 25 were in support. A petition signed by 231 people was also submitted to the Shire opposing urbanisation of Wattle Grove South. The Shire ignored the whole lot and pushed on with urbanisation anyway. When considering the Shire's local planning strategy in respect to the Council's push for urbanisation of Wattle Grove South, the WA Planning Commission commented as follows. In summary, the Commission in recent years has maintained a consistent opinion in respect to Wattle Grove, identifying it as an area of investigation, but by no means a certainty as suitable for urban development, with associated amendments to the MRS planning scheme, detailed structure planning and subsequent subdivision development. The Office report at point 8 is also relevant. The Western Australian Planning Commission's North East Regional Sub-Regional Framework, adopted in 2018, identifies a majority of Crystal Brook as an urban expansion area. The eastern portion of Crystal Brook is identified as urban investigation area, subject to key considerations. The Planning Officer's report has failed to acknowledge that the Department's acceptance of urban planning direction came about solely as a direct result of the city lobbying for this change without first having consulted with the residents to ascertain their views. Why would the Shire consult the residents prior to lobbying the WA Planning Commission to urbanise Wattle Grove South? It had feedback from local planning strategy that 85% of Wattle Grove South residents objected to urbanisation. The Shire was also aware that consistently over a period of 10 years, 80% of the residents opposed urbanisation by stealth in 32 Garville Road. The Shire did not consult because they knew what consultation would bring and they didn't like it. Even though the Planning Office does not mention at point 8, one of the key considerations should be that the WA confirmed that the classification of existing rural zoned areas as urban should not be construed as support for future development of these areas as high density. Planning Office report at point 9 to 16 deal with the failed industrialisation of Wattle Grove South plan, or as I like to call it, the Trojan horse plan. Hit them with the possibility of industrial to soften them up and then appear magnanimous by promoting the lesser evil of urban residential. The telling item in the Plan Officer report is at point 16B7, where the land north of Welshpool Road East, bounded by Tonkin Highway, Lewis Road and Hartfield Road, and Hartfield Golf Course is included in Wattle Grove South. This is isolated from Wattle Grove Rural by 80,000 plus cars a day Blue Road. I can only speculate that the area has been included, among other things, because the residents of the area had evidenced themselves throughout the failed industrialisation debacle to be vocal supporters of urbanisation. The Planning Officer report at 17 to 21 details the appointment of Roberts Day on the 27th of August 2019 at a cost of almost 80,000 plus GST to prepare the Wattle Grove Concept Plan. Roberts Day were the third ranked tenderer and their quote was 2/3 cheaper than the amount of the other tenderers. In explaining the price difference at the council meeting of the 27th of August, an extract from the officer's report presented for council consideration at the meeting explained the significant price difference between Roberts Day and the more expensive submissions. The first being that the majority of Roberts Day's expertise exists in-house, and the second being the cost of 3 external experts from Curtin University Sustainability Policy Institute were to be provided at no cost to the project team. The Roberts Day Concept Plan published for comment on the 3rd of March 2020. I've been employed by Curtin University for a period of 10 years as property portfolio manager and a consultant. I identified and negotiated premises for CUSP in Fremantle in 2007 when they moved from Murdoch University to Curtin. I negotiated and managed their lease till 2013 when they moved back from Fremantle to Bentley campus. I got to know those involved with CUSP and acknowledge their high standing. The involvement and endorsement of CUSP of the concept plan would grant it high credibility. I therefore find it very difficult to understand that if CUSP experts were part of the project team, why Roberts Day did not mention or credit CUSP or their expert involvement contribution to the production of the concept plan released in March 3rd, 2020. On November 2019, I received a community survey from Roberts Day. After carefully reading the survey, I rang Xander Cameron from Roberts Day and expressed to her I believe the questions in the questionnaire were leading and loaded and appeared to be an attempt to ask questions to which response were predictable and easily manipulated to be used selectively to substantiate any predetermined or desired outcome. I also questioned why the most important question had not been asked. Do you want Wattle Grove South to remain rural? I had that question been asked in action, the ratepayers could have saved themselves hundreds of thousands of $100,000 plus of the concept plan cost. I also made the comment that similar questions have been asked ad nauseum over the last 14 years and that Roberts Day could just refer back to responses and surveys undertaken in previous consultation in respect to 32 Garble Road rezoning, numerous vision workshops, draft planning strategy, the North East Regional Planning Framework would establish that 85% of Wattle Grove South want the status quo. The Roberts Day survey had a total of 80 responses from Wattle Grove South and had 37 responses which supported residential development over the long term. This, incidentally, approximately the same number of people who have been pushing for years to urbanise Wattle Grove South for industrial uses or anything else they think is more valuable than rural. As my discussion with Xander Cameron, the community survey is now being utilised by this planning department for exactly the purpose it is written, to provide justification for continuing the push for urbanisation to benefit a very small minority of Wattle Grove South residents.
You just have a minute, Mr.
One thing I do agree with the planning officer on is there are 3 options. Option 1, accept the concept plan, which cost $180,000 and which 2 people support. Option 2, accept the revised concept plan on which nobody has had the opportunity to comment directly and which keeps the threat of urbanisation hanging over the heads of the majority. Option 3, my parent, throw the whole sorry, flawed concept plan and the officer's report in the bin and let us get on with our lives in peace without the biannual harassment from the city's planning department acting for the few. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vletter, for coming to speak to us. I would now like to invite Diane Wilkie to come and give her deputation.
I do have copies of what I'm going to say, then, for the councillors if they want to. Thank you. Good evening, council, staff, ladies and gentlemen in attendance tonight. I actually wish to present my views on the support of the amended concept plan, first for the night. I believe the general tone of any deputation presented by landowners within the Wattle Grove South area should be one that protects their rights to continue to explore the opportunities for appropriate urban development. The proposed urban landscape, predominantly located south of Crystalbrook Road, allows this to occur. The concept plan and consultation with the community has been a lengthy and time and resource consuming process, and the community are exhausted. The WAPC North East Sub-Regional Planning Framework identifies most of Wattle Grove South under the adopted framework as urban expansion, with a portion of the land identified as urban investigation. Urban development south of Crystalbrook Road is consistent with the North East Sub-Regional Planning Framework. The City of Kalamunda's local planning strategy of 2011 provides a vision and strategic planning direction for the municipality over the next 20 years. Wattle Grove South is identified in the strategy as investigation area. As such, future urban development aligns with the city's local planning strategy. Urban development represents an opportunity for significant areas of vegetation currently in private ownership to be set aside for conservation and protection in the long term through public open space and the implementation of scheme provisions in future structure plans will allow for significant areas of vegetation to be acquired, set aside for conservation and appropriately managed. Maximising tree canopy, tree retention and general environmental amenity will best be served by a coordinated approach to development. An ad hoc approach to development will not achieve the best outcome, in my opinion. Structure planning will provide for an improved and enhanced management of land and natural environment in comparison to the current special rural scheme provisions. The topography of the area is flat and relatively unconstrained for urban development. Urban development of the site represents the most efficient use of the land, given its strategic location in close proximity to Perth CDB, approximately 15 kilometres. Perth Airport and major employment areas at Kenwick, Maddington, Wattle Grove, Kewdale, Forestville, High Wycombe. It also capitalises on existing infrastructure and services, the future Forestville train station and nearby major arterial routes, for example, Tonkin and Roe Highway. I thank you for giving me this opportunity of expressing my views in relation to supporting the amended concept plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wilkie.
No worries. Yes, if you'd like to pass them around, I've done about 12, I think.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Andrea Belf to come and give her deputation.
Good evening. Good evening. Andrea Balfe, 22 Balcon Road, Wattle Grove. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillors and CEO. Thank you for your time and consideration in allowing me to present my deputation. Along with the majority of residents of Wattle Grove South, I urge Council to accept option 3, which ceases further planning for the study area, allowing affected households to enjoy the lifestyle that we chose, and being thoughtful and considerate custodians of our own properties, we will maintain the significance of this area as a community-minded group for the greater community. As we are all very aware, we are living in a time where our decisions made today will have significant consequences for our future, and it is up to us as individuals, families, communities, local council and government to make the right decisions now. Since colonisation, about 100 of Australia's unique flora and fauna species have been wiped off the planet. The rate of loss, which is as comprehensive as anywhere else on Earth, has not slowed over the past 200 years. Since federal laws were introduced in 1999, the list of threatened species and ecosystems has grown by more than a third, from 1,483 to 1,974. Rapid urban and agricultural expansion is largely a contributor. In Agenda Item 10.1.1, the City confirms that 3/4 of affected residents and respondents want this area to remain as it is, that is, zoned rural and special rural. I ask councillors, whom are elected by the people for the people, to ponder over this fact very carefully, please. The Roberts Day concept plan proposed land uses which is largely urban and is the cause for the above 3/4 rejection by the community, and for good reason. Urbanisation is denser housing, has fewer green spaces, less tree canopy, less wildlife, flora and fauna, all of which are under such pressure now for survival. Forests are being knocked down in frightening numbers, of which the city of Kalamunda, unfortunately, has been documented now, and I quote, as having one of the largest reductions in tree canopy cover in Australia over the past 4 years. The North East Sub-Regional Planning Framework is due to be reviewed in 2021, and there is no immediate push for change. South Ecological Survey's AECOM report, dated the 28th of February 2020, acknowledged that there is significant ecological value within this area. This significant report substantiates the need to retain our current rural and special rural zoning. Urbanisation will destroy this ecological sense of area, as developers will simply come in and clear all of the land, sadly, as we have evidently seen in Wattle Grove, Cell 9, High Wycombe and the Mooksy area, just to name a few. Most urban areas are unsustainable systems and depend largely on non-urban areas. In summary, I ask Council to consider this with the utmost consideration, and again request that Council accept option 3, which ceases further planning for the study area. We have to remove our own selfish interests to make a quick buck now. We have to think about the interests of others, as what we decide now will leave a legacy for our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. I would now like to invite Liz Grow to come and give her deputation.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, councillors and city staff. My name is Liz Grow and I live at 35 Gavor Road, Wattle Grove. I've been a resident of Kalamunda Shire over the last 28 years, when I bought one of the original farmhouses that were remaining in the area in Jack Road. The reason I chose Wattle Grove was so my 3 children could grow up with a sense of space and a sense of country. Here they could learn, Here they could learn to look after the world around them by observing the natural habitat within our own backyard. We identified and photographed more than 20 species of birds, and together we learned both respect and caution for many other animals who share our space, including tiger snakes, because when it rained the creek rose, became a river, and yes, there were tiger snakes. As good fortune would have it, priority 2 of Kalamunda's strategic community plan was and is Kalamunda Clean and Green. It was a perfect fit for me and my family. We all benefited being on a special rural property in Wattle Grove because the Environmental Protection Act of 1986 regulates the clearing of native vegetation, but it allowed for my children to have a pony, a dog, chooks, all important things to help them learn responsibility. The children attended the local primary school, and my youngest son enjoyed the science extension program up at Lesmurdie High School. It was an excellent program. During those wonderful years, when your children are young, you do everything with them that you can. And living in Wattle Grove, special rural Wattle Grove, gave my children what they call an idyllic childhood. Well, you know, the years rolled by and we get older, and for personal reasons in 2003 I moved away for a while. But 15 years ago I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase in Gable Road and once again live in this beautiful, natural, special rural environment. And it is very nearly the same as it was 28 years ago. But that is only because it is protected by its rural and special rural zoning, and the fact that the WA Planning Commission considers Wattle Grove South to be outside the area that is suitable for urban infill. I've been nursing for 41 years, and as we do, I worked 6 days a week sometimes so that I could bring up my children, pay off my mortgage, and renovate my home to make it comfortable for when I can retire. In March this year, I came home from a stint of working in our regional areas, setting up COVID testing clinics. That was a fairly trying time. To find a city in lockdown, a map that had a road running from one end of my property to the other, and my suburb being called Crystal Brook. I was very puzzled. My house isn't fancy, but it's mine, and I felt as though I had actually been displaced. I felt like a displaced person. I practically cried for 2 days, but that was probably shock. Then after a week or so, I started asking questions and found that there was a concept plan that would, in essence, destroy everything I'd worked for and lived by for 28 years. I also found I wasn't alone in my turmoil because there was already an overwhelming majority of objections from residents of the area, and only a very, very small few who supported any part of that plan. Then came the modified concept plan, and this still doesn't make any sense to me. Interestingly though, there was a disclaimer published by Roberts Day that divested them of all responsibility for the accuracy, validity and comprehensiveness of their plan. In effect, they upended my world and took no responsibility for it. As I've said, it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, my children have grown up now and moved away, as they do, but our grandchildren come to visit, and we walk through the block and we collect the discarded feathers of the black cockatoos who still come to roost in our backyard in the marri trees up the back. We should all do everything we can to protect and preserve this environment. The EPA supports it, the Econ Wattle Grove Ecological Survey publication supports it, many other environmental studies support it, and just as importantly, the residents support it. In my 41 years of nursing on the front line, emergency medicine and in hospital management, I have learned that the hardest part about making decisions is that they're not always going to be popular, either with our peers or with our opponents. But in positions of influence, we are chosen and we are expected to look at all of the facts presented to us, and no matter the money already spent here, there is nothing that can be done to improve this concept plan that could possibly make it acceptable. And I believe no more time and money should be spent this way. As the custodians of the future of Wattle Grove South, I urge you to reject entirely this concept plan and its modified version. Be finished with it. This is not the place for urban infill. The only option that properly reflects the will of the majority of residents in Wattle Grove South is option 3. Please vote for option 3.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. It's great. Councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen, I think we should have a 5-minute break, so please stick to the 5 minutes and return then. Thank you. Let's resume the meeting by inviting Kim Manson to come and give her deputation.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I just wanted to quickly say thank you to the councillors that responded to my email that I sent the other week. I appreciate you taking the time to do so. That was lovely. The officer's report states that there are... Oh, sorry. Am I supposed to give my name?
Just
Kim Manson, 45 Ridley Road, Wattle Grove.
thank you.
The officer's report states that there are varying views and varying levels of support for the future direction of this subject area, based on feedback provided by residents, and these comments were also made at the briefing. According to the results of a Freedom of Information request I made, 237 ratepayers' submissions were received giving feedback on the draft concept plan, with all but 2 totally rejecting the plan. Feedback also shows that residents went one step further with their submissions, and 75.11% of submissions were received not only rejecting the concept plan, but requesting to stay rural zoning. And 21.10 submissions were received rejecting the concept plan and wishing to be changed to zone urban. It is seriously downplaying the magnitude of these responses to simply say dismissively that the responses were varied. These responses show that the overwhelming majority of rural Wattle Grove residents reject the concept plan and want to stay at our current zoning. The zoning has allowed block sizes of 2,000 square metres and above. Large property owners can already apply to subdivide at their own costs. In my view, this lack of statistical clarity in the report makes it difficult for councillors relying on all the information being presented to them to make an informed choice on their vote. The report and briefing provided to councillors regarding government department responses was also somewhat ambiguous and limited in detail. The departments of main roads, health, environment, emergency services, water and planning are some of the departments that raised points of concern regarding the draft concept plan, but none of these were mentioned at the briefing meeting. It should have also been communicated to councillors that, including rural Wattle Grove in the North East Regional Framework, did not come about from a request by the Department of Planning, but rather as a direct result of a request made in 2015 by City of Kalamunda staff. The Department of Planning has identified Wattle Grove South as staying rural. Also of note, as confirmed by City of Kalamunda staff at a recent council meeting, residential Wattle Grove still has an excess of 450 lots to be built upon. As a resident who has in good faith attended workshops, feedback sessions, council briefings and meetings, I find that the report does not outline all the relevant factual information needed to inform councillors correctly. It relies on opinion and interpretation and is devoid of meaningful factual analysis. In reality, the opinions offered to the council in no way reflect the feedback from the community or even good planning procedures. We already have the legal right under our zoning to apply to subdivide at our own cost. We should not be forced to have our homes, lifestyle, environment and property values destroyed to fund a small number of residents who wish to maximise their land yield at the expense of the environment. The officer's report states option 2, cease further planning for the project area and note the modified concept plan as the preferred option, with a little, some may say, sneaky note saying until council resolves to recommence further planning. The residents should not be made to go through this over and over again, in the hope that we get sick of this nonsense and stop fighting for our homes and lifestyles. The information on this option contains so much doublespeak that councillors were continuously asking for clarity at the briefing meeting, and after receiving what some may view as vague answers, still seemed unsure of what was being put forward, as were some of the general public at that meeting. Neither the draft concept plan or the modified concept plan are statutory documents, and therefore they have no legal weight at all. So why are these other options even being put forward? The draft concept plan has now been amended to give us the modified concept plan. And if you have a look at this modified map, it appears to show that many of the residents who previously wished to industrialise this area have had their properties highlighted in a light yellow colour, which gives the impression that the officer is saying this area should be urban. It is important to note that this broad light yellow brush colour scheme includes a number of properties whose owners are strongly against industrialisation or urbanisation. I think I made a word up. That said, however, as the entire modified concept plan has no legal standing, it is ridiculous to ask councillors to endorse it, no matter what the colour scheme. As councillors, I would urge you to think about this whole process as a continuum. From the push in 2015 to have this area put on the Perth to Peel future planning, the push to have industry, and now the push to have high density urban in such a wonderful rural setting, which is the gateway to the hills. I think if you look at where this has come from, you will see that this is not community driven. It is not for the benefit of the whole community or the wider community. In fact, this whole concept plan is driven by people wanting to make money off their properties, and there's nothing wrong with that if it's done correctly and not at the expense of an entire neighbourhood and community. Proper planning for the area should reflect the community's wishes and benefit all. Councillors, I ask you to please have a look at the responses from ratepayers of this community, who once again have given a clear and direct message that we reject the draft and the modified concept plan. Please reject the officer's options and move to have the draft and modified concept plans discarded, and inform Department of Planning that residents wish to remain zoned as rural. Doing so will allow residents wanting to subdivide to go through the proper channels, and will show the ratepayers of rural Wattle Grove that you have listened to them, understood them, and respected their clear majority instruction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us.
Thank you.
Mr. Robert Prue, would you like to come and give your deputation?
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Good to see you all again. My name's Robert Prue. I live at 52 Crystalbrook Road, Wattle Grove, and it's been most interesting listening to the deputations. Not much has changed. No one wants it. Anyhow, just as a point of interest though, a week ago, myself and another member of our community went to see a presentation by the Kalamunda and Districts Historical Society, and the lady there was talking about the foothills, and she started off with Wattle Grove, and I could see why, because the people she outlined who actually started Wattle Grove after it was gone through a big farm sort of thing and then got divvied up, the people who, actually one of the councillors was there, yes. Once it was divvied up, those people have fought continuously there. Since then, you can see, to keep it as it is. And I thought to myself, well, you have a look at it. They fought to have the first decent school. They fought to have the first church. the first hall. It's always been a community. Unlike areas like Maida Vale, etc., which she outlined were big areas owned by a few, which soon were urbanised, the area of Wattle Grove is unique, and I don't think people understand that it brings forward a certain type of people, because the way she described it then had people as passionate about their place in our country as what these people here are tonight, except for two. And so anyhow, moving on, for my deputation this evening, I'd like to make a few points regarding the future planning of our Wattle Grove area Crystal Brook concept plan. I've got it down to a brief because we've had so many good deputations. I can't believe councillors that we need another repetition of what was said, but it's brilliantly done tonight. I must congratulate my fellow deputies. It is worth noting at the start, and I will repeat this, that only 2 submitters supported the Robert Days plan. 2. Only 2. We spent $100,000. We had all consultation. There was people in the room. There was at least half a dozen of them, and they managed to come up with the plan which only 2 people supported. Unbelievable. This feedback from the residents, ratepayers, needs to be acknowledged. And anyhow, councillors, I really like to talk to you about this. I would now like to draw your attention to the Ecovision position paper. I commend it to you. I know you all have received a copy, and sincerely thank those councillors who have read and responded to it. It is an outstanding document by any measure. And Ecovision, and in particular Bev Dornan, deserves high praise for the quality, comprehensiveness, futuristic positions taken. If you wanted something better than Robert's Day, that position paper is it. I'd hope that the city officers have taken note and understand that people who write such papers, as the Ecovision paper, are driven by no other motive than for the betterment of the people and the environment. There's no dollars, there's no getting on TV and talking about it. They have written that for the betterment of the people in the area. There's something else I'd like to finish on is a request to councillors. We often hear this thrown up through city officers about the problem of the airport. Now, I know Councillor Boyd has been on a committee in the past. I don't know whether she's still on the airport committee, but no, you're not. The problem is that it's a bit like a festering sore or a red herring. We'd take it whichever way you like. Every now and then it comes up, the reason why we have to do something nasty to Wattle Grove is this, that there's going to be these planes flying over it and wrecking it. Now, my understanding is there's flight paths. Those flight paths the plane have to fly over. And I don't know anyone actually in Wattle Grove who's complaining where we are. I know other parts of Wattle Grove is different, but where we are, there is no complaint about the aircraft. We've lived with them. The flight paths run around the back through the Maddington industrial area. And yet we continually hear about this need for taking some sort of evasive action from this oncoming onslaught. And the question I ask is, I wonder if the councillors are aware of what the actual city officers are aware of. Is there some sort of a deal done between the city people and the people who run the airport? Because a previous Lord Mayor here told me that we would never find out what the city officers know about what goes on at the airport because they have meetings with the top people. Now, I'm not saying there's anything underhand about it, but I've read nothing about it. I've heard nothing about changes of flight paths, and yet still we have this coming out of the city officers about a problem with the airport, and we all should be happy just to sell up and get out of it before they drop bombs on us, I suppose. So I'd ask councillors, could you please quiz, whenever possible, what's happening with this airport, that it should always be brought up. And also ask, because I've got in fact asked the city administration, is it pushing back against any suggestions of further flight paths changes? And if not, why not? If there's this big problem with the airport, what is being done by the city officers, and are you councillors finding out about it? Because if there is correspondence, can it be tabled for councillors and ratepayers to view? If planes fly over Crystal Brook, then they will consequently fly over parts of Lesmurdie and Kalamunda. As I've mentioned to Councillor Stallard a number of times, I don't understand this infatuation with a problem with the airport. It is a private company. We obviously will have to watch them. But is it a red herring? I don't know. But please, councillors, if you can keep an eye on that for us, it'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us. Could I now invite Kim Sinclair to come and give a deputation? Okay. Okay, so Mr. Alex George, AM, is going to give a deputation. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Dornan.
Sorry, I'm running late. I've just come from Murdoch University. I'm making a presentation for the Wattle Grove South proposal. I gather you want a little bit of introduction about me and then my comments. So
yes,
it
please.
won't take very long. I was born in East Fremantle and lived for 30 years in Melville. My parents loved getting out in the bush, and their love of wildflowers rubbed off on me. My grandfather lived in Boyer, and we often visited him, so I became familiar with the hills bush. We also had outings to Maidavale, Lesmurdie, Mundaring Weir, and other places in the hill, and I still have memories of those early times in the bush. I have a degree in English Literature and Botany from the University of Western Australia. In 2009, I was awarded an Honorary Doctorate of Science by Murdoch University, and in 2012 I became a member of the Order of Australia. I worked for the Western Australian Herbarium for 21 years with fieldwork throughout the state, from Cape Londonderry to West Cape Howe, and from Dirkharder Island to the state border and beyond. So I understand what a unique part of the world we have here. In the 1970s, I was a member of the Conservation Through Reserves Committee that reviewed national parks and reserves throughout Western Australia. Many of its recommendations were accepted by the state government. I then spent 12 years in Canberra as executive editor for a series of books on the flora of Australia, and since 1993 have been a freelance botanist based in Perth. Currently, I'm an adjunct associate professor in the School of Veterinary and Life Sciences at Murdoch University. My working career included 3-year-long terms based at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, as the Australian Botanical Liaison Officer. Among botanists internationally, a mention that you come from southwestern Australia arouses envy that you live and work in one of the richest plant regions on the planet. You have all, I hope, read the relevant papers, including the ACON report, and you've had a long meeting, so I won't go into details. Regarding this particular area, I came to know it well, as for 5 years I lived in Kalamunda, so drove through it on my way to and from work in South Perth. It is still one of my go-to places for enjoying and showing people our wildflowers. The area lies largely on the Ridge Hill Shelf Complex that even at the time of foundation of Western Australia in 1829 did not cover a large area and has been impacted severely by development. The complex occurs only along the foot of the Darling Scarp in the Perth metropolitan area and a short way north and south. It contains vegetation and flora that occur nowhere else. As noted in the report, less than 6% of the original area retains its natural vegetation. I have studied particular wildflowers such as this Diane. You won't be able to see it too well from there, but in a book that I wrote on the Banksia family about 35 years ago, this Diane, look at it later if you want to, that I discovered at the intersection of Crystal Brook Road and Brentwood Road in 1972. It's been replaced by houses and is now a threatened species. And this rare isopogon, the one down the bottom here, photographed at Orange Grove, or sorry, I mislabelled it in here as Orange Grove, it's actually Wattle Grove. They're still there at the foot of the hills by Wellspool Road, and I would like to think that it will be there many years from now. Each time I pass this spot, I'm reminded of what was there before the houses. I've travelled in countries such as Britain, where virtually no natural landscape in the strict sense survives. What they call natural over there is almost all created by man, maybe over a couple of thousand years, but it's all created by man, and is essentially, it just means non-urban. It gives me an uncomfortable feeling to know how much we humans have changed and are changing the planet. In Western Australia, I've seen many places that were bush, now under fields, houses, roads, factories, farms, mines, places that now can no longer be seen and appreciated in their original state. Apart from the small bush forever block by Wellspool Road East, there is no land within the Wattle Grove South area that is reserved for the purpose of conservation. I should stress it is not possible to offset the area with bushland elsewhere, since there is nowhere equivalent in its landforms and biodiversity. Our species, Homo sapiens, evolved in and from the natural world and still has strong intellectual and emotional connections with it. The very name sapiens means being wise, being sensible, and to me that includes acknowledging and not turning away from our natural environment. Thus, for our well-being, it is vital that the remaining pockets of natural vegetation be retained, otherwise a unique sample of the state's, indeed the world's, biodiversity will edge towards extinction. As I wrote in my report, I hope that in 50, 100 years' time and beyond, residents and the city will be able to look back and commend the present generation for its foresight and wisdom in retaining the natural attributes of the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. George, for coming to speak to us. Mr. Kevin Bennett, would you like to give your deputation?
Good evening, Madam Chair, councillors and the public gallery. My name is Kevin Bennett of 782 Wellspool Road East, Wattle Grove. I thought long and hard about whether to speak here tonight, and I came to the conclusion that by staying quiet it might lead some people into thinking that I no longer care. Well, I do care, so here I am. I want to share my thoughts tonight with not only councillors and council staff, but also members of the public listening here tonight and online via the YouTube live stream. In June 2018, the city announced it was to carry out a feasibility study for 360 hectares of Wattle Grove South. At that time, it was almost 50-50 with residential and light industrial being proposed. At this time, an overwhelming number of landowners, of some 75%, were in favour of not necessarily light industrial, but at the very least being able to do something with the land that they had invested in. And I include myself in this group. At subsequent meetings and after some community consultation, a motion was passed by council that the light industrial area was replaced and renamed commercial, retail and tourism. This was welcomed by most landowners within the area and something that we could definitely work with. At no stage, as far as I know, were there any opposition to this motion, and in hindsight, it was a great decision for our area. In early 2019, I presented a manifesto to the city of how we saw the evolution of our area. Unfortunately, while this isn't going to happen, I still stand by what I presented at that time. It was just after this that Councillor Michael Fernie raised the motion that a community-based consultative committee be facilitated by the city. Unfortunately, this didn't gain any momentum because of the divide and unwillingness of the people who don't want anything to happen to sit down and discuss options. Instead, the city engaged community consultant Robert Day at a much greater expense than the aforementioned Community Consultative Committee. I might add. Future Wattle Grove presented our publicly available manifesto to Robert's Day and openly invited discussion and debate as to how we move forward with the planning for our area. At one of the workshops ran by Robert's Day, it was made clear that the city had an obligation to provide land for around 5,000 homes in Wattle Grove South as an urban infill. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that at all, but that's what was said. Together with some commercial, retail and tourism businesses. It was made clear by Robert's Day that the development proposal or concept plans would have to come some way in providing these outcomes, or the WAPC would not look favourably upon the plan. So here we are today to discuss which of the three options are best in moving forward. In my view, option one would have been the preferred option and the best all-round outcome for everyone. The land and property owners who would have seen their investments come to fruition and they could have carried on with their lives living in their properties. Kalamunda City, who could have had a green and sustainable district structure plan that could have been the envy of not only Perth but Australia-wide. And the wider community as a whole, whose properties would have increased in value just by being in the proximity of this prestigious project. And even those who only see green, as the environment would have been a huge and instrumental part of the overriding plan. But I do understand why the planners and councillors have not really even looked at this option. It really is too hard to work with such a divided group. But I want to say here and now, in front of everyone, for everyone to hear, in the public gallery, at home, on YouTube for years to come, this was not our doing. We have always wanted to talk, to discuss, plan, negotiate, compromise, and work with those wanting to work with us. Our thoughts have been for all to see, open and transparent, right from the very start of this process. There's been no secret documents, slanderous comments, or misleading information from our part. Councillors and city staff have also been heavily lobbied by the group that want nothing to happen. So in my mind, there's only one group whose fault it is that we are where we are. Regarding last week's presentation of the amended plan, it was discussed by councillors about the differences between city staff's preferred option 2 and option number 3. Well, if I could add a little insight into these options. The public and councillors should be very aware and understand that big developers have been gaining significant momentum and are actively signing up landholders in this area. They have been very busy talking to people and trying to get them to sign up to land option agreements. Even as recently as last week, I was invited to one of these meetings, an invitation that I chose to decline. And I must say, although publicly being accused of representing big developers, I have never personally spoken or represented to any of these big developers at any council or anywhere else for that matter. This is mainly due to the fact that I won't sign the non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements that they want you to sign. And this is also a reason why some of the landowners can't talk to you here tonight. Once these developers have signed enough landholders up to their agreements, they will put forward their own DAP, but with a huge difference to you or I do in this same process. Make no mistake here, this is what they do. They will use their power, money, influence and connections at the state and federal levels, not to mention the Planning Minister and the WAPC, all of whom want to stimulate the economy and provide jobs. They will help and enable the big developers to make this happen. If councillors are thinking of choosing option 3, please think of what I've just said. It really isn't going to make that much difference. All you're doing is making it even easier for the big developers to push the prices down of land, push the prices down of land and put pressure on the remaining landowners with increased uncertainty as to what's happening, even for those that don't necessarily want to sell right now. Added to this, there really is no reason at all to waste all the ratepayers' money and resources that have been spent on this process so far, unless you want to enable these big developers even more than has already been done, which is actually very ironic, and something that the Want Nothing group totally failed to see. If councillors want to do the right thing for the majority of landowners and the absence of choosing option 1, then they should take note of everything that's happening right now on the ground. And note this amended Roberts Day plan, along with LLP 28 and Appendix 8, which all future developments should have to refer to. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bennett. And our last deputation is Mr. Gerard Luck, if you would like to come and present. Mr. Luck, if you sit in the middle.
Hi. Evening, councillors, mayor and councillors. I'm Jerry Luck from 75 Victoria Road. We never had any consultation with the Roberts Day from day one, which is a bit of a pun. And we find that we're in the concept that a road is going through our block. And we've got one of the smallest frontages, and we weren't told about, or even consulted about this, but if our block is, I think, 30 metres, with a road verge, we're going to lose quite a bit of our block. And we moved to Victoria Road some 5 years ago. It took us 4 years to find it beforehand. We looked all around the area, and we bought it because we like the open space and the greenery, etc., that goes with it. And I'd like to see this whole plan deleted. Most of the people before me have put the case very well, and I agree with wholeheartedly with what they've said. So we think we've been harshly treated by first not being consulted, and we even found it hard to get information from the council. We had a meeting with Mr. Brooks finally, with follow-up. It was hard to get, and we're just a bit disheartened by the whole deal. As far as the money spent on the concept, I look around me at all the open spaces and ovals, and I find they're in need of care, as in more trees, etc. You know, little creatures and that have got nowhere to go. We've got bare ovals with trees around the edge, and no one even goes to these places. The whole open area as such is rarely visited by people, and yet this whole area wants to attract people into it, or the concept rather, wants to attract people to the area, and they're not even utilising what is here. And plus the requirement for more work or greenery, as I can see, is what needs to be, the upkeep needs to be enhanced, because it's no good starting something else without having the town or the city itself looking good. Little critters just don't have areas to, no logs, no bush areas. I mean, I know there's snakes and things around, but the locale needs more infrastructure, more money spent, I think, on even greenery. There was talk about opening the creek down the bottom here, allowing that to run. Water that's going to, the cost and water that's going to go into that seems, excessive, because there is other things that can be, I can see, that are needed beforehand, So I can only reiterate what the previous people have said, and I agree with them, that the concept should be thrown out. It does seem a bit airy-fairy. They say on one hand, we want greenery, we want people to come in. A lot of people are not going to drive from Perth down to have a look at, the few trees that we've got, when around the city it's dry as a bone, in the summer that is. So, that's all I have to say really. I'm a bit disappointed in that the concept, the second concept, it seemed to be just changing a few words and things, but still having the same push as, the agenda was the same, but with a few administration changes, even though people resented, and opposed the concept. So, that's all I can say. I'm not real happy with the outcome, and I think the consultation part is very bad, and the cost to have that plan that is rejected by the majority of people. So, with that, thanks very much.
Thank you. Just a second, Mr. Luck. Councillor Sewell would like to ask you a question.
Sure.
Thanks, Mr. Luck, for your deputation this evening and taking the time. I'm concerned that you said that you weren't consulted with through the Roberts Day plan, and I'm just wondering how that happened, because my understanding was that every resident received a letter.
No, we didn't.
You didn't receive a letter. Okay, this is just what I'm wanting to clarify. And also, there was some forum, like many forums, and an opportunity for feedback to be provided. Were you not made aware of those forums, or?
Well, we only realised late in that year that these were on. We didn't have any information. We've since got all our emails and everything, all our mailing together with them, but with the council. But prior to that, we didn't have any drop letters in the mailbox or people consulting us, visiting us even on the property, and so. We were, well, I guess, disgusted about the whole deal. So, maybe we weren't home at the time, but we never had any follow-up. Even the council, when we come to see Mr. Brooks, there wasn't a proper registration of us as far as the council. We had to represent our names, etc., and emails, and it was quite, wasn't good anyway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luck, for coming to speak to us.
Okay, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all of the deputations. I would just like to sincerely thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us tonight and giving your excellent deputations, and the councillors gleaned a lot of information from you. And with that, I will declare the meeting closed at 8:14. Thank you very much.